My daughter and her husband cleared out my savings account and handed me a foreclosure notice on my own property. I smiled, walked to my truck, and made 2 phone calls. 4 days later, they left me 43 voicemails begging me to come back. They thought they'd buried me. They forgot I was the one who'd taught my daughter how to read a contract. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and drop a comment telling me what time it is where you are right now. It means more than you know. The drive back from my brother's place in Knoxville takes about 6 hours if you don't hit construction on I-40. I'd been gone 4 days helping him move into a smaller place after his knee surgery. Nothing dramatic, just family doing what family does. Or what I thought family did. I noticed it from the end of the driveway. The garage door was open, which wasn't unusual. My son-in-law's truck was parked sideways across the apron, which was. 2 cardboard boxes sat on the front walkway. My first thought was that they'd been doing some kind of spring cleaning. My second thought was that both boxes had my handwriting on them. My name, written in the black marker I used to label things in storage. The same marker I'd had since before my daughter was born. I sat in my truck for a full minute before I got out. The boxes were mine. Bathroom things mostly. My shaving kit, the old electric razor I'd had for 15 years, my reading glasses in the brown case, the prescription bottles I kept on the bathroom shelf. Someone had gone through my things with purpose. Not randomly, not carelessly. They'd packed the way a person packs when they want someone gone and they've thought about it for a while. I carried one of the boxes to the front door and knocked. My own front door. The door I'd replaced myself 3 years ago when the old one started warping in the Florida humidity. I'd special ordered the hardware from a place in Sarasota because my daughter had said she liked the brushed nickel look. I'd knocked on that door with my own fist because something in my gut told me not to just walk in. My son-in-law answered. He's a big man, played college ball back in the 90s, still carries himself like someone who expects rooms to move around him. He looked at the box in my hands the way you look at something you expected to see but hoped you wouldn't have to deal with just yet. "Hey, Norm," he said. Not Dad, not even close. Just Norm, like I was a contractor he was paying by the hour. "Want to tell me what's in these boxes?" I asked. He stepped back from the doorway without fully opening it. "Why don't you come in and we can talk?" The living room felt wrong the moment I stepped inside. I've lived in that house for 11 years. I know every corner of it, every place where the floor creaks, every window that sticks in the summer. It felt wrong the way a room feels wrong when furniture has been moved and you can't immediately tell what changed. Something was different and I couldn't name it yet. My daughter was sitting at the kitchen table. She's 41 years old, and in that moment she looked younger than that in the worst possible way, like a teenager who's been caught doing something and hasn't decided yet whether to apologize or double down. "Dad," she said. Just that. Just the word, like it was the beginning of a sentence she hadn't finished writing yet. "Rebecca packed your things," my son-in-law said, coming up behind me. "We've been talking about this for a while. We think it might be time for you to have your own space. Your own space." I'd heard that phrase before. I probably used it myself at some point years ago, in some context that didn't involve handing a 64-year-old man a cardboard box of his shaving supplies on a Tuesday afternoon. "This is my house," I said. My daughter looked at her hands. "We've been doing a lot of thinking," my son-in-law said. "The house is really in both our names now, and we feel like the arrangement has run its course. Both our names. I want you to understand something about that phrase. Because when I heard it, I didn't get angry. I didn't raise my voice. I've been a licensed civil engineer for 37 years, and one thing that profession teaches you is to be very precise about what you actually know versus what you're assuming. And what I knew, standing in that living room, was that I needed to be very careful about what I said next. "Whose name is the mortgage in?" I asked. My son-in-law shifted his weight. "The house is paid off, Norm." "I know it is," I said. "I paid it off. Whose name is on the deed?" My daughter finally looked up. Something crossed her face that I hadn't seen before. Not guilt exactly. More like the expression of someone who realizes a conversation has turned a corner they didn't anticipate. "We can talk about all of that," she said. "But right now, we just need you to understand that we need our space. As a couple, we've been very patient, and we think this is the right thing for everyone." Patient. That was the word that got me. Patient. I had co-signed their original mortgage 9 years ago because my son-in-law's credit was in rough shape after a business that went sideways. I had moved in to help with the grandkids when my daughter went back to work part-time. I had paid off the remaining balance in the mortgage when my wife passed and left me a life insurance settlement. Because my daughter had cried in my kitchen and told me she was scared about their finances and I didn't want her scared. I had paid the property taxes every year. I had replaced the roof, the AC unit, the water heater. I had been patient. "I'll be back tomorrow," I said. I picked up the box from where I'd set it on the entry table, and I walked out. My son-in-law called after me, "Norm, there's no reason to make this difficult." I didn't answer. I put the box in the back seat, got in my truck, and drove to the end of the street before I stopped. I needed a minute not because I was falling apart, because I was thinking, and I think better when I'm not in a room with people who've already decided how they want the conversation to end. I sat there for probably 10 minutes. The street was quiet. A sprinkler was running somewhere down the block. A kid on a bicycle came around the corner and didn't look at me twice. Then I pulled out my phone and called my buddy Alan, who I have known since 1987 and who has spent most of his career doing real estate closings in Hillsborough County. I told him what happened in about 4 sentences. "Don't touch anything," he said immediately. "Don't sign anything. Don't agree to anything. Come to my office first thing tomorrow morning and bring whatever paperwork you have." "I have everything," I said. "I kept copies of everything." "I know you did," Alan said. "That's why you're going to be fine." I drove to the Hampton Inn near the interstate and paid for a room with my credit card. The woman at the desk asked if I was in town for business. I told her something like that. The room was plain and clean and quiet, and I sat on the edge of the bed for a while looking at the box I'd carried in from my truck. My shaving kit, my glasses, my prescription bottles. My wife's photograph was still back at the house. I'd left it on the dresser in what used to be our bedroom, in the silver frame she picked out herself at a little shop in Clearwater. I thought about that photograph for a long time before I fell asleep. Alan's office is in a low brick building off Dale Mabry, the kind of place that's been there so long it looks like it grew out of the ground. He was waiting for me when I arrived at 8 the next morning, coffee already made, reading glasses on, looking the way he always looks when something has made him professionally interested. I spread the paperwork across his conference table. The original purchase agreement from 9 years ago, the co-signed documents, the deed of trust, the payoff letter from the lender when I'd settled the remaining balance, the property tax receipts going back to the beginning. Alan read without talking for a long time. That's how he works. He's not a dramatic man. He reads, he thinks, and then he tells you what he sees. "Norm," he said finally, "you are the sole owner of this property." I'd suspected as much, but hearing it out loud felt different than suspecting it. "Marcus is on the original mortgage documents as a co-borrower," Alan continued, "but the mortgage is satisfied. The deed was recorded in your name only when you purchased the property. The payoff you made came from your personal funds. There is no instrument anywhere in this paperwork that transferred any ownership interest to your daughter or her husband." "They said the house was in both our names," I said. Alan looked at me over his reading glasses. "What they believe and what the county property records say are two different things. Would you like me to pull the current deed?" He pulled it up on his computer right there. My name. Only my name. The way it had always been. "What are my options?" I asked. Alan leaned back in his chair. "As the legal owner of the property, you have full rights to occupy it, rent it, sell it, or request that any other occupants vacate. If they refuse to leave voluntarily, you would go through formal eviction proceedings. But Norm," he paused, "before you decide anything, I want you to think about what you actually want here. Not just what's legal. What do you want?" I thought about it for a long moment. "I want them to understand what they did," I said. "Not just what they tried to do, what they actually did. To their kid's grandfather. To me." Alan nodded slowly. "Then let's talk about how to make sure they understand that clearly." I spent the rest of that morning with Alan going through the options. By noon, I had a clear picture of where things stood and what I intended to do about it. I also had the name of a property management company he trusted, a referral to a realtor who specialized in quick sales in that zip code, and a very specific understanding of the timeline involved. I did not call my daughter that day. I drove instead to the storage facility on the north side of town, where I kept my extra tools and some boxes from when my wife and I had downsized years ago. I had a key to Unit 14, and inside Unit 14, in a fireproof lockbox I'd purchased at a Home Depot in 2009, were the things I kept separate from the house. The original deed, the closing documents, the insurance policies in my name, the account statements, everything Alan had just confirmed. My own personal archive maintained out of habit by a man who'd spent 4 decades reading contracts for a living. I'd never told my daughter about the lockbox, not because I was hiding it, because it had never come up. That afternoon I called my brother in Knoxville. "I know," he said when I'd finished explaining. "You know, she called me about 2 months ago, asked me some questions about Mom's insurance settlement, what it had been used for, whether I thought you had any claim on the house." I sat with that for a moment. 2 months ago. "What did you tell her?" "I told her I wasn't getting in the middle of it," he said. "And then I called you 3 times trying to hint around it without actually saying it, and you kept telling me everything was fine." He wasn't wrong. I had, because I'd wanted everything to be fine. Because when you're 64 years old and your wife has been gone for 3 years and the only family you have left in driving distance is your daughter and her husband and their 2 kids, you want very badly for things to be fine. You convince yourself that the small frictions are normal, that the sighing when you come into the kitchen is just stress, that the conversations that stop when you enter a room are just coincidence. You find reasons to explain what you don't want to see. "I'm sorry I didn't push harder," my brother said. "You didn't do anything wrong," I told him. "Neither did I." I extended my stay at the Hampton Inn for 1 week. I told the desk clerk I was dealing with a property matter. She gave me the long stay rate without me asking. On Thursday, the realtor Alan had referred me to a woman named Christine who wore sensible shoes and spoke in the precise, unhurried way of someone who has closed several hundred transactions, came to my hotel room and we talked for 2 hours. I gave her the deed, the property tax information, the square footage and lot size from memory because I'd hired the surveyor myself. She pulled comps on her laptop while I watched. "Based on current market conditions," she said, "this property should sell between 410 and 430, probably closer to 420 given the upgrades you describe. New roof in 2021, new HVAC, updated kitchen. Buyers in this neighborhood are looking for exactly that." "How quickly can we list?" "I can have it on the MLS by Monday if we do photos Friday. We'd need access to the property." "I'll arrange access," I said. That was not entirely true when I said it, but I was working on it. I called my son-in-law that evening. He picked up on the second ring, which surprised me. I think he'd been waiting to hear from me, waiting for the conversation where I would ask them what I needed to do to make things right, what terms they had in mind, whether I could have my room back if I made myself less present, less inconvenient, less of whatever it was I had become. "I need to come by the house Friday morning," I said. "I have a contractor coming to assess some work." There was a pause. "What kind of work?" "Routine maintenance. Roof inspection mostly. I want to make sure everything is in good shape." Another pause. I could hear the television in the background, my grandchildren's voices. "Sure," he said finally. "I guess that's fine." "I appreciate it," I said. Friday morning I arrived at 8 with Christine and her photographer. My son-in-law's truck was gone. My daughter opened the door in a bathrobe, clearly not expecting 2 strangers with camera equipment behind me. "Dad, what is—" "This is Christine," I said. "She's going to be handling the sale of the property. Her photographer needs about an hour to get the interior shots. If you and the kids need to be somewhere else during that time, that would be fine." My daughter stared at me. I watched her face move through several different expressions very quickly. "The sale," she said. "The property is listed on Monday," I told her. "Christine will be in touch about showing schedules. I'd ask that you keep the house reasonably presentable for showings. It makes a significant difference in how quickly things move." "You can't sell this house," she said. Her voice had dropped to something I hadn't heard before. "This is our home. The kids live here. You can't just—" "I can," I said. "And I am. Christine has the documentation confirming my ownership if you'd like to review it." Christine, to her credit, said nothing. She simply stood there with the quiet authority of someone who has handled difficult family situations before and knows that her job in this moment is to be a professional witness. My daughter turned to her husband, who had apparently come back at some point and was standing near the hallway in his work clothes, keys still in his hand. "She's selling the house," my daughter said. "I'm selling the house," I said. "It's my house," I said. "It's my house. I own it. I've owned it for 9 years. I paid off the mortgage with my own money. My name is on the deed. I have the documentation. The title company has the documentation, and the county property records confirm it. You are welcome to hire your own attorney to review everything if you'd like." My son-in-law looked at me the way I imagine he looked at the business partner who'd cost him his credit rating years ago, like he was doing the math on how badly he'd miscalculated. "How long do we have?" he asked. It was the right question. I gave him credit for asking it. "Christine can answer your questions about the showing schedule and expected timeline," I said. "I'll ask that you cooperate fully with access for showings. As the legal occupants, you're entitled to reasonable notice before each showing. Christine will provide that." I turned and walked back to my truck. Christine and her photographer went inside. I did not look back at the house as I drove away, but I did look at it in my rearview mirror once before I turned onto the main road. 11 years. The dogwood tree I'd planted in the side yard the spring my granddaughter was born was flowering. I'd chosen it because my wife had always liked dogwoods. I thought about calling my daughter that night. I picked up my phone twice. Both times I set it back down. She called me instead at 9:47. I let it go to voicemail. She called again at 10:15. Another voicemail. My son-in-law called at 10:40. I let that go too. By midnight there were 9 messages. By the following evening there were 31. By the end of the week the count was at 43. I listened to all of them eventually. Not right away. I listened to them the way you read a document that you know is going to tell you something you already suspected but needed confirmed in writing. The early messages were angry. My son-in-law's voice tight and clipped, talking about lawyers and legal action and things that were going to be very difficult for me if I didn't stop this immediately. My daughter's voice harder than I'd ever heard it, telling me I was being cruel, that I was punishing the children for something that had nothing to do with them, that this wasn't who I was. The middle messages were confused. How had I done this? Who had helped me? Was there something they'd missed in the paperwork? Could we please just sit down and talk like adults? The later messages were different. My daughter's voice much quieter. "Dad, I don't know what I thought was going to happen. I think I convinced myself that you'd just go. I don't know. That doesn't make sense now that I'm saying it out loud. I don't know what I was thinking." My son-in-law one evening when he probably thought he sounded more together than he did. "Norm, I've been sitting here trying to figure out how to say this. I think we treated you like you were already gone, like you were already in the past tense. And I think I let that happen and I didn't stop it, and I don't have a good reason for why." I listened to that one twice, not because it changed anything, because I wanted to understand whether he meant it, whether the man who had told me 11 years after I'd co-signed his mortgage, after I'd paid off his house, after I'd fixed his roof and his plumbing and his AC and shown up every single time he needed me, whether that man saying he didn't have a good reason was the closest thing to honest he'd ever been with me. I decided it probably was. I also decided it was about 9 years too late. I was in Savannah by the time the sale closed. I'd driven up the coast with no particular schedule, stopping wherever felt right, eating at places that looked like they'd been there since before I was born. Tybee Island for 2 nights, a little place outside Brunswick where the shrimp were fresh and the owner had opinions about college football. I was sitting on a bench outside a bookstore on Bull Street when Christine called to confirm the closing had gone through. 418,000, she said. The buyers were motivated. They have 2 small children and they loved the yard. I sat there for a moment with my phone in my hand, watching a man walk a very old dog past the bookstore, both of them moving at exactly the pace that made sense for them. "Thank you, Christine," I said, "for everything." "It was a straightforward transaction," she said. "Clean title, well-maintained property, motivated seller, those go smoothly." After I hung up, I called my brother. "It closed," I said. "How do you feel?" I thought about it honestly, like I set something down that I'd been carrying for a long time without realizing how heavy it was. He was quiet for a moment. "What are you going to do now?" "I'm in Savannah right now. I'm thinking about driving up through the Carolinas." Maybe spend some time in Asheville. I've always wanted to spend real time there, not just passing through. And after that, I found a condo in St. Pete that I want to look at. Ground floor, which I don't love, but it has a workshop space out back, which I do. I want to build things again. I used to build things before I stopped having time. You had time, my brother said gently. You just kept giving it away. He wasn't wrong. I called my daughter once, about 3 weeks after the closing. She picked up on the first ring. I could hear how carefully she was breathing. I'm not calling to argue, I said. I'm calling because I want you to know that I found you a good tenant. The property manager I used has a 2-bedroom unit on the other side of Tampa opening up in about 6 weeks. It's a decent school district, month-to-month lease to start. I gave them your number. Whether you call them is up to you. Silence on the line. Dad, your children are my grandchildren, I said. That doesn't change. When I'm settled in the new place, I'd like to see them. If you're willing to make that happen, I'd be grateful. But I'm not going to live somewhere I was told I wasn't needed. You understand? I understand, she said. Her voice was very small. I hope you mean that, I told her. I really do. We said goodbye without either of us knowing what came next. That was honest. I gave it that. I drove north out of Savannah with the windows down and the radio on a station that played older country, the kind with actual steel guitar. The road was straight and the sky was that particular shade of blue you only get in the South in early May when the humidity hasn't settled in yet. I had nowhere to be that day. I had nowhere to be the day after that either, and the day after that, and for the first time in a very long time that felt like an answer instead of a problem. My wife used to say that some lessons only make sense in the rearview mirror. You don't understand what you are carrying until you've set it down. You don't know how long you are bending until you finally stand up straight. I drove for a long time thinking about that, and the road kept going, and the sky stayed blue, and eventually I stopped thinking and just drove. If this story meant something to you, please like this video and subscribe to the channel. Leave a comment and tell me what time it is where you are, and if you want to hear the next story, it's in the box to the left. Thank you for being here. I've had a lot of time to think about what happened, driving up through Georgia and into the Carolinas with no particular deadline and nobody expecting me anywhere. That kind of quiet has a way of making things clear that noise kept blurry for a long time. What I keep coming back to is this. The situation with my daughter and Marcus didn't happen all at once. It happened the way rust happens, slowly, in places you don't think to look, until one day the structure gives and you're standing there wondering how you missed it. The truth is, I didn't miss it. I just kept deciding that what I saw wasn't what I thought it was. That's not weakness exactly. It's something more like hope that's been stretched too far past what the evidence supports. I did that. I own that part. But here's what I've also come to understand, not as a lesson from a book or something someone told me, but as something I watched happen in real time, right in front of me. The way you treat people who cannot immediately retaliate tells everything about your actual character. My son-in-law was perfectly decent to me for years when he needed the cosign, when he needed the mortgage covered, when he needed the roof fixed and the AC replaced. The moment he calculated that the debt was settled and the asset was secure, the decency evaporated. That's not a personality flaw. That's a value system. And value systems, unlike moods, don't change because circumstances got uncomfortable. My daughter knew what was happening and said nothing. I think about that more than I think about anything Marcus said or did, because she knew me. She knew what those years of help had cost me, what I'd given up, what I'd chosen not to have for myself so that our family could have stability. She knew all of that, and she sat at the kitchen table and looked at her hands while her husband told me my time was up. There's a version of this story where I blame him entirely. I don't find that version honest. What I try to hold on to, and I mean actually hold on to, not just say out loud, is that intelligence without integrity is just a more efficient way to cause damage. I was smart enough to keep my paperwork. I was smart enough to know Alan for 30 years and to call him before I did anything else. I was smart enough to understand what my name on a deed actually meant. That intelligence mattered. But what mattered more was the discipline to use it without cruelty, to do what was legally and rightfully mine to do without burning down anything that didn't need to be burned. I sold the house. I found them a rental lead. I called my daughter once and I told her the grandchildren still mattered to me. None of that was weakness. All of it was a choice about the kind of man I intend to keep being, regardless of how I was treated. The road has a way of putting things in proportion. You drive long enough, and the thing that felt enormous starts to look like what it actually was, a situation that required a response which I gave, and which is now behind me. I'm not carrying it. I set it down somewhere outside of Savannah, and I haven't picked it back up. What I want, if you're listening and something in this story sounds familiar, is for you to keep your paperwork. Know what you own. Know who your Alan is before you need him. And understand that the people who make you feel like you're asking too much by simply existing are not the measure of what you deserve. You already know your own worth. You just have to stop explaining it to people who've decided not to hear it.